I'm excited to welcome back Thomas McConkie to the Leading Saints podcast. Thomas, how are you?
Hey, I'm good. Good to see you, Kurt. Thanks for having me here.
And you are back east now, doing some schooling.
Yeah, that's right. I've been in Massachusetts, Boston area for about a year and a half. I'm halfway through a 3 years master's degree, so
That's
it's been really
fantastic.
interesting. I'm looking into human development, spiritual flourishing, all the stuff that I think Latter-day Saints tend to be curious about and engaged in.
Yeah, and in all your spare time, you've recently put a book together called At-One-Ment,
Yes.
embodying the fullness of human divinity. I lost the subtitle there, and this is sort of as a spin-off of your was it Transformations of Faith series that you did? It was a video series, almost like a master class, right?
Yeah, that's right. Faith Matters, the foundation, asked me to put together an online course. So, video presentation that was pretty sizable. It was probably, I can't remember, it might have been 10 to 12 hours of lecture or, video.
Mm-hmm.
And later on, Bill Turnbull said, these transcripts read a lot like a book. What do you think about, you think you got a book in you? And I worked with it for a couple of years. And the At-One-Ment came out of it, I think took the video presentation in new directions, and I'm still exploring what it all means.
Yeah. Well, I think I'm so glad you put it in book form. I think this is your perspective, your experience. It's so insightful that I think it just needs to have sort of the immortality of the written word. And you're a McConkie, and McConkie's write books, right?
Yeah, we
So
must. They kick you out of the family if you don't publish by the time you're
that's right.
35, I think.
Nice. I love it. I love it. And I had the privilege of reading the book, and I do a lot of reading on my exercise bike in the morning, and there's this moment, and I usually put like some instrumental music on, and sometimes the music is from a movie or other things, but getting into this book, I'm like, okay, this music is not working, and so I went over to like a spa meditative playlist, and I'm like, yep, there it is.
There it is.
So
Cool. Maybe you could share that with your listeners, the
there
ideal
you go.
soundtrack to read this book to.
Yeah, because I mean, you're obviously so thoughtful and meditative. I mean, obviously, and so just sitting with some of these concepts, I needed to clear my mind of any other noise, unless it was sort of more calming and focusing. So
Well, I'm happy to hear it had that effect on you. I hope it was edifying.
yeah, so I love the title. Obviously, it's a play off of atonement, and we've heard this. I think
I heard this I heard this in
yeah,
Sunday school when I was
yeah,
seven.
you
And
break the word up, and
even at the time, I remember, even when I heard it as a young kid, I'm like, wow. I was blown away by that.
yeah, yeah, and an atonement is very much a Latter-day Saint word. I think if you said it to an evangelical or a Catholic, they sort of get what you're saying, but we've definitely sort
Hmm.
of owned this word in our theology. Is that how you feel?
I feel a lot of ways. I don't know
Okay, all right,
how
let's hear
much
it.
time you want me to spend on this. I mean, atonement, this is theological reflection that came many centuries after
Yeah,
Christ's life. People, the early Christians and Jews didn't talk about atonement the way we do. But I don't think that should discourage us from talking about it. They didn't talk about
right.
golden plates either,
Yeah,
right? Or at
exactly.
least, not the not the mainstream even at the time. So I don't think we should shy away from new words and innovations in the tradition. And for me, atonement it's where I take it in the book. It's a really powerful invitation to join ourselves fully with God and with the divine life.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
it. And that's really been a North Star for me in my life of faith. It's a very meaningful experience for me to notice when I feel at one with the divine and when I don't. And when I don't, what can I do that would align myself more with the privilege of being a child of God? So it's very meaningful to me, and I hope it's meaningful for other people to explore.
yeah. So I whenever we chat and do interviews, I realize it's always a fool's errand for me to prepare a list of questions, and I'm going to go point by point with Thomas about all these questions because we always find unique places to go, and your insights are always so intriguing. And so I want to maybe try this mental exercise. If you were walking into a room full of Latter-day Saint lay leaders, bishops, stake presidents, Relief Society presidents, and the whole room is full, maybe 1,000 of these leaders, and they're all looking at you. Like, just from your background, your perspective, like, what message would you want to start with as you see that crowd of leaders?
Yeah. Thanks for that question. It's something I love about you and your body of work, just how focused it is on leadership in the church and what a difference a sensitive, inspired leader can make to all of us. And we're all leaders, right? We're all
Yeah.
in that role
Yeah.
to an extent. Room full of leaders. I come in. Well, I would start with any variation on the theme of how do we really come back into the body, come back into our divine embodiment, and how do we start to notice when we're lost in our thoughts, lost in kind of daydreams and anywhere but the fullness of what's right here. Um, I'm going to talk a little bit, but as you listen and as people listen to this conversation, I hope they'll start by doing something as simple as like finding their feet. It's like when I tell you to find your feet, it's like, okay, I know where my feet are. I can feel them now. And oh, it's kind of warm and tingly when I bring my awareness to my feet, and I can feel my feet on the ground, and whether I'm sitting or walking or whatever, I feel the sense of being supported by the ground, and oh, then I can relax in my body a little bit. And oh, when my body's relaxed, my heart starts to soften. I can kind of open my heart a little bit. When my body's relaxed, when my heart is open, my mind is lucid. It's even more alert than it was a few moments ago, but it might be more silent. What I hear from a lot of students, because I teach this, human development, contemplation for a living. What I hear from students is the more they're just present in and through their body, their divine vessel in their heart, the mind becomes more sharp, becomes more keen, but it also becomes more silent. And when the mind needs to boot up and be brilliant, well, that's what minds are good for. But we can learn to feel and think and know more through all of our faculties. And I think we're at a great advantage living in the fullness of times, and we're at a great disadvantage. The disadvantage is that someone or something is almost always trying to capture our attention and get us to think about something and get us to do something. It's much less common in my experience to be invited to like just take a slow breath and to ground and to be still and know that God is God. So a lot of my adventure, my exploration in the gospel has been in that territory of really coming to know stillness at a deep level. And I've found that as I come to know stillness, my body feels more vibrant and alive. My heart feels more open and compassionate. And my mind works better. When my mind is working, it's working better than it's ever worked. And when it's not working, it's resting and it's getting ready to work when it needs to. So I would say coming back full circle to a room full of leaders, I would say that, I'm serious about the subtitle of the book, that the fullness, to embody the fullness of our divinity is not even just a lifelong practice, but I believe it's something we'll be doing into the eons as divine beings. So why not start right now and like really draw from the wisdom, the intelligence and divinity of the body and the heart, and not just make the thinking mind do all the heavy lifting. So that's a big theme in the
Yeah.
book.
Yeah. That concept of fullness is really intriguing. It's in the subtitle, right? Embodying the fullness of human divinity. And,
Right.
as I step back and just observe the theology that we have, even, the pinnacle of that theology being the temple experience of being endowed from on high, from a divine being, given identity.
Yeah.
Talk about fullness. Like,
Right.
not only do we may assume walking into that building that we're in a state of fullness, but then he'll say, "Oh, there's so much more space to make it more full," and
Right.
it's a remarkable to just realize this is a theology of fullness, and God is
Yeah.
offering us fullness, right?
Yeah. Thank you. Amazing. Absolutely. And as you say that, it occurs to me we could do like just a little like play a quick game kind of.
Okay.
And by game, I mean this book. I'm not pronouncing doctrines per se. That's not my intention in the book. It's not my
Yeah.
business or my mantle, my calling to do that.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm inviting people to pay attention in a new way and to just see what divine realities reveal themselves when we pay attention in a new way. That's it. So as a game, I would invite you to, just for a moment, anyone listening, to just call to mind, call to heart, call to presence, somebody that you love very deeply. It can be more than one person, but one person helps us focus a little bit. Just any person. It can be a pet too, if it's a dog, an animal. Just give yourself a moment to really call this being to presence, and feel how unique your bond is with this being. It's one of a kind. There's no relationship like it in the whole created universe. And in the uniqueness of this relationship, feel how much you love them. Just like no holding back. All the love you have is theirs. It's everything every good thing you have to give to them is forthcoming. And just feel how big, feel how immense that love is that you have for this being. And then, as if it were coming from behind you as a support, feel the unsearchable, the infinite love of God that's actually moving through your unique vessel to love this being. In other words, it is by God's love that we love. And is there any boundary to that? Can we find the boundaries or the limits of God's immensity and love? And so for a moment, to just open ourselves to the immensity of love that my experience is, it's pouring through us right now. And in our unique way, we're offering this love to everyone and everything that we love and serve and take care of. And in just that little exercise, you start to get a taste, I start to get a taste of how fullness is. Fullness is, it's bigger than I can say.
Yeah.
It's bigger than I can think. And I find it's an appropriate place. Many people find it a natural place to deepen their faith and their inquiry into the gospel from this place, not from a place. Some people orient to ideas more and theologies and doctrines, and that's great. And others, like myself, maybe it's because I'm left-handed. Who knows? Like,
hey, me too. So
hey, there you go. So two lefties, but we're all wired differently. And I find I actually quite like the intuitive open space of the exploration of sacred beauty, which I feel when I slow down a little bit.
Yeah. Just like the thoughts that come to my mind just going through that exercise is that, like you said earlier, like there's this moment where, like when we show up in life in different contexts, even in leadership contexts, we turn on our brain, right? It's like, let's make sure we get a good breakfast, and we're going to fire our brain up on all cylinders, and we're going to handle problems and answer questions and do these things. But just going through that, and it's almost that grounding experience. It's almost like you, instead of turning on your brain, you turn on like that divine identity. Yeah. And it's the fullness is such a great word, because it feels, it's not just my brain and my cognitive, function that's happening, but it's my spirit. It's suddenly God's light has the opportunity to come through me, and so fullness is a great way to perceive it.
Yeah, thanks for articulating that. As you speak, I get the image of a fire. If you've ever built a fire, camping in the woods, in your backyard, wherever, you figure out pretty quickly you need to find the balance between how much flame and how much wood, how much fuel. And you can quickly choke off a fire by throwing like too big a log too soon onto it. And I think many of us in this day and age have that relationship to the spirit, to God's immensity of love with our thinking about it. It's like we feel some love and boom, we start to think about it because, oh, wow, this gives me so many ideas about so many things. And when I'm counseling with somebody let's say I'm their leader, and they look to me in my leadership position, it's a real discipline to like let those flames of love really grow and become vivid before we throw just like a twig on, just to like give it a little kindling, right?
Yeah.
So in general, most people I meet say like, oh, I think too much. I didn't realize that I think 1,000% more than I actually need to than is useful. And a lot of the book is just help. It's to draw from scripture, from revealed doctrine, the ways in which we're encouraged in the gospel to embody our fullness.
Yeah. So I want to sort of pause and just consider maybe the type of people that are listening to this, in the leadership audience. There we are in that room full of leaders, and somebody raises their hand and says, "All right, Kurt." Tom was like, "What are we doing here? Like this? Come on! Like this sounds a little bit too woo woo. I mean, yeah, mindfulness, sure, but like at the end of the day, like we got the gospel, we got the things. Like, what are we doing here? Like, what's the point of all this? It just sounds. I get lost in all the terms and things. So, I mean, how would you respond to that? I'm just sort of considering the potential audience that's out there.
It so happens that I get this question all the time from different people. Think about, I'm in an image-based mood today, apparently, because I keep seeing images as you're talking, so I'll just trust it. But
nice.
I think about my grandparents who spent a whole lifetime together and just how deeply they loved each other.
And you have pictures of them behind you, isn't it? They're a little
so
small on my screen.
I do have pictures of my grandparents hanging over my head, just, inspiring me. And their love was very quiet, right? Like when they had all the grandchildren over for a Sunday dinner, or when I just like kind of caught a glimpse of them just together off in a corner somewhere in the house, the love that flowed between them, it was very silent. It's as if after 50 years of marriage, you don't need a ton of commentary on like, are you feeling this right now? Are you feeling what I'm saying? They just know it. They embody the same space because their love is so deep. They've become one in their union. So, to the person in the crowd who says, what are we doing here? I would say we're allowing love to do love's work, to actually open our hearts and deepen us. In my life, the most powerful gospel teachings have not come in the eloquence of what the person is saying. It's come from an intuition I have, like where they're saying that from, the place from their divine being, the place those words are coming from is what's moving me. And the words are just helping me notice that better. But I would suggest the more intimate we can become with this love and this quality of silence, the more force our testimony, our witness has for other people. That's been my experience. That's been a moving experience for me that I like to share with others. Yeah. Of course we can use our words, right? And of course, sometimes, in a room of 1,000, 100 of them are going to be like, I still think I'm in the wrong room. I dislike you a little bit less than I did 10 minutes ago, but I'm still in the wrong room. That's fine. It's not, we all have our own approaches. This is not supposed to be some universal new approach to just like the wisdom of the gospel, right?
Yeah. When you say allowing love to do love's work, like so profound and really, we know, we can encapsulate the concept of love in doctrine, right? We know the doctrine of love, the power of love. Love's all over in the scriptures. And so many times as leaders, we think, I got to love my people. I mean, that's something we hear a lot on the Leading Saints podcast when I ask people, how do you lead? And they always say, just love the people, right? And but that seems so fleeting. Like, okay, what? Like you hug them a lot, or
exactly.
What do you? And oftentimes leaders will default to this cadence of, well, no, I stand up in front of Relief Society and say, I just love you. But I think what you're illustrating is just this process of like, no, actually, this is like this grounding experience. Then love does the work. It's not you articulating the words that does the work.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. I explore this a lot in the book. What gets in the way of love, you could say. And what I find, like, yes, I've heard that response a lot too. Just love the people and tell me love them. But like, we also all have the experience when someone says, I love you, and it kind of registers a little shallow, like, oh, you're saying that because I know you love me. You're not lying, but I'm not feeling it. It's not like bringing me to tears right now. Right.
Right. Yeah.
And I think the difference is like when are willing to be very vulnerable with themselves at the deepest level, when they're willing to lay themselves bare to divine love and to let that move through them. Because when we do that, we don't get to control the message. We don't get to dictate what we say or who we even say it to, right? Love recruits us to do its work. So it's a very vulnerable thing. It's actually what I explore in the book is it's a very intense and vulnerable experience in the body to let ourselves be moved more by divine light and love. And certainly I guess by some standards, I'm young, by some I'm old, but at my ripe age of 43, I look back on my life now and I think, wow, like I had no idea how defended against God's love I was. Like I thought I was doing the loving work, and I see all the ways I kind of tried to keep myself safe and control the message. So this is a path of infinite exploration. I think we'll never be done with it.
Yeah, I where my mind goes is I'm just thinking of the leader who's like, listening to this thinking, I love everything that Thomas just said there, and okay, but I mean, this afternoon or this evening at 7 o'clock, I got an appointment with Sister Jones, and I don't know, like, I want her to feel that. Like, is there like a crash course you can give us on just like approaching these relationships, sometimes leadership relationships with that love or making
Yeah,
space for it? What comes to mind?
totally. Well, a number of examples of vulnerability that I avoid, and I've learned from experience doing this work that other people avoid. Going 5% slower, right? What is it? Why should it be vulnerable for me to slow down and say less? I don't know why, but it is. Whenever I
Yeah.
go slower, it's as if like whatever we were trying to protect and defend by going faster and having all the right things to say, they come to the surface. It's exposed. Do you notice, like, this is a random example, but directly related to your question, I think. When someone says a prayer to, let's say, close the sacrament meeting, and we all do this. It's not a kind of person. It's something that we all do. There are moments when like we're willing to be more vulnerable and undefended. We run out of things to say, but we have enough faith to just pause. It's like, I don't know what I'm going to say next. And I'm in front, I'm at the pulpit. All these people are listening. I want to sound
Yeah.
good. Right.
Right.
We get
Yeah.
nervous. So, there's a choice point there. We either keep talking and, pray, we rattle off some cliche just to break the silence, or in
Yeah.
our better moments, I think we like realize like, oh, there's something powerful here. And I don't have words for it, but I'm going to just give it an extra beat and see what comes through me. It's as simple as that, like just slowing down and like letting silence make us a little nervous and uncomfortable and taking a breath. And maybe with, what was the sister you named?
Sister Jones.
Sister Jones. How did I forget? Was Sister Jones even naming a moment of like, I'm a little nervous right now. I don't even know what to say, but I want to say something that's true and honest. So instead of just saying something, I'm gonna just wait, if that's okay. Something like that. And
Yeah.
anytime any gospel teacher has done that for me, and there have been many, and they've changed my life, it's like the whole conversation, the whole room kind of goes ka-chunk, and it drops down to this deeper space of like, oh wow, like I feel like the quality of presence in this room between us just changed entirely because we took a risk to be a little bit more open towards one another, a little less defended.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really helpful. Just that slowing down 5% more, and and that can show up in many ways, or you can reach for that in different ways. Of even I remember as a bishop, I for whatever reason I would set up my appointments at 30-minute increments, right? And
Yeah.
not because usually that's just how long it takes, but sometimes there's this pressure of like I have to take this person to the top of Mount Sinai and back down and solve their problem
Yeah.
and read the scripture and do all these things. But even to just say, maybe I'm going to space that out a little bit more, and then that'll give
Yeah.
me a little more confidence in slowing down 5% more, right? So, any
Yeah.
other thoughts or come to mind?
Well, just, another vulnerable thing to say is when we admit to someone like, I don't know the answer to this.
Yeah,
I don't know how to comfort you right now. I don't know how to lead you right now. But I have faith that God knows how to lead both of us. And then we wait and watch, you know?
Yeah.
So those come to mind.
Yeah.
And this is
That's really
not,
helpful.
this is not one size fits all. I'm not just telling people to slow down and chew slower and talk slower. It's not that. It's to be honest with ourselves. Like when I'm with other people, am I willing to be vulnerable? Am I willing to be seen? Am I willing to be confused and lost, etc.? Like all these experiences we all are experts at avoiding.
Mm-hmm.
How willing am I to go up to the edge of my known world? And when I'm willing, in my experience, when I'm willing to go up to the edge of my known world, like something deeper takes over. Once I'm completely out of my, I'm into terra incognito. Is that the word? Like all of a sudden
Yeah.
something deeper comes through.
Yeah. Yeah. And it takes a bit of faith to do that, to slow down, because,
Yeah.
you want to be the leader that is just fast with response and this scripture and let's go here. And there you
Right.
go. A, B, and C. That's the we'll see you next week or whatever.
Yeah,
And off
exactly.
they go. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. It's difficult. So sometimes knowing this experience of like saying, I know what to do. Sometimes we just do. Sometimes we just know. And sometimes we realize that knowing has been masquerading as knowing. And actually that knowing is insecurity and it's fear and it's anxiety. And I'm not willing to slow down because it's actually too intense to realize that I've been pretending to know more than I actually know.
Yeah. This takes my mind that I'll just mention this. Maybe it's meant to be, but an exercise I do, and I got it from a different author, but he talks about the power of a list of 10 ideas. So whenever I'm facing a problem or I have a question, I force myself to sit down and write out 10 ideas as far as the next step or how I can approach it or whatever it be. And it's interesting to see what unfolds in that, because by idea number 3 or 4, I actually have 1 or 2 ideas that are pretty solid that I can actually move forward with. But
Yeah.
by forcing myself to now, no, I'm not done yet. I'm going to finish the list of 10, and maybe there's 12, 15, 20, but I'm just going to let that do that. And it's remarkable, by the 9th or 10th line that I get to, not only is it a great next step, but I mean, it's sort of laced with revelation, because it just
Right.
opens up and like, wow, that is a phenomenal next step or a phenomenal idea. But if I didn't give the space of just slowing down and going through the whole process, I never would have gotten to that deeper revelation.
Yeah, no, that's a beautiful example. I love that.
Yeah. You mentioned your grandparents. In the book, you tell a story about going to conference to hear your grandfather speak in conference. Will you give us the circumstance of that and what you learned from that experience?
It was 2008. I remember kind of being in between tours, like, I was between Europe and China the whole of my 20s. I went to conference, and my granddad spoke. It became a pretty well-known talk, come what may and love it, at least for the Wirthlin aficionados. Certainly for our family, it became a well-known talk.
Yes, absolutely.
But I was,
and you were in the church at this time, right? Or you weren't active, quote unquote, active.
hadn't been in the church for 15 years at that point, a long time. And I was what really struck me, what touched my heart about that talk, is it felt so familiar. Actually, I had a rare experience at that time in my life of feeling like I was at home when I was like at a church function. In this case, it was general conference. And everything my granddad said, it spoke to my heart, and my heart told me that I know this. What he's saying, I love. Like, I love what this man loves. And that was one of those moments to have the experience of loving what a dear family member of mine loved. I was back home, after all those years of being away and not feeling like I had a home. It really changed me. And it also evoked, I think, some of the deepest wisdom of Christ's teachings, like come what may and love it is a kind of, it's some kind of parallel phrase with thy will be done, right? It's like whatever comes up, I'm going to just give it my whole heart, and I'm going to love it, even if it's not what I would have chosen for myself in this moment.
Yeah.
So there was the homecoming for me. There was that element, but then there was also just being laid bare by Christ's depth and his love that I felt. that talk. So that was, it was a special experience for me that I
Yeah.
share about a little in the book.
And, as you talk about your grandfather, and not only in this book, in other contexts, as we've had conversations that, I mean, as an individual who maybe had stepped away from the gospel and not the traditional route, and sort of gone on this, this journey around the world and learning about their mindfulness and Buddhism and all these things. I think there were probably many opportunities to classify your grandfather as far as, especially an apostle. I mean, talk about orthodox, and he just doesn't get it, but just these examples of you capturing like these moments of love. And I mean, he really was just this being of love that, when there was probably many ways you could maybe stretch it and fit him into the box of like, just roll your eyes at grandpa, there he goes again, Mr. Apostle, or but I mean, was just a loving man that, as you, in hindsight, as you look back, that God was just showing up for you through
Yeah.
him in
Yeah.
unique ways.
Thank you. Yeah, that rings true to my experience. Sometimes often I think when we call someone simple in modern English, it's pejorative. We mean that person's like kind of slow or
Right.
dim-witted. My granddad was a very simple man, and it was actually in his willingness to be simple that I felt the deepest love. So I think just his influence really shaped the way I experienced the gospel, and that was a real juxtaposition. I admire many McConkies are gifted with quite keen intellects. Bruce R. McConkie, many know, he had a very keen intellect, and I admire that gift very much. But it was interesting to see in my family those two kinds of gifts playing out, like very keen intellects, like doctrinally very sharp minds, scriptorians, and that kind of tradition in the McConkie family. And I think a tradition of simple virtue in the Wirthlin family. And we need both. Obviously, they're both, equal gifts in God's eyes. And to me, like, what really changed my heart was my grandparents' simplicity.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love reading about your story of just being, what was the experience talking about? Like, you just wake up one day and you think, I'm going to church, and you walk into this LDS chapel, like, here I am. I don't know why I'm here, but I just love that draw.
I was blown away. Yeah, no. And that's very much in the spirit of simplicity. Like that was, and for people listening, Kurt's referring to a moment, just a little vignette from the book where it was an utterly simple moment. I literally had no thought about it. I hadn't been to church in 20 years, and I woke up and I thought, wow, I'm as surprised as anybody, but the only thing I want to do is go to church today. And that was the simplicity of God's love. It was too simple for even a thought.
Yeah.
Had I started to think about it, I wouldn't have made it halfway to church because it wouldn't have made any sense. So in that way, I think God blesses us with a love that's so simple we can't formulate it in the mind.
Yeah. And going back to that leadership perspective, I mean, I think some leaders hear that and like, all right, Thomas, tell us how do we can that, and so that I can give it. There's a lot of people in my ward that they just need to just wake up and come to church. So how do I do that? There's like a deeper relational dynamic happening there. I mean, what comes to mind for leaders who are just desperate for? I mean, obviously, we want individuals to just show up to church and feel His love and have that ping in their heart.
Yeah, no, what a difficult job so many leaders have to love their congregants, love the people in their ward families and their stakes, and to genuinely want them to be in the fold in the congregation, and have no idea how that's going to happen or what they can do to affect that. I can say, not to get on too much of my Wirthlin grandparents and that whole kick, but another lesson I learned from my grandparents was what I've called in the past the way they played the long game. I did not feel a shred of anxiety from them about what was going on in my life. Maybe they felt anxiety about me, maybe they didn't, but when I was with them, I sure didn't feel it. It was as if they had so much faith, and faith being, in some ways a synonym of patience. When we have infinite faith, we have infinite patience, because I I already know what's going to happen. I don't know when it's going to happen or how, but I know it's going to happen. I have faith. So I felt that coupling of faith and patience with my grandparents. And in that sense, like, what was 20 years away from church? I'm not recommending people take 20 years away from the church or not, or don't, but what was 20 years in the eternal scheme of things? I think my grandparents, better than most people I ever met on the planet, I think they had an idea of what 20 years was in the eternal scheme of things. Mm-hmm. I think more than I do and more than many of us, they could see years and centuries and millennia in the way that God sees years and centuries and millennia. And so they gave me a lot of grace and a lot of space. And, paradoxically, that changed my heart instantaneously.
Yeah.
It took no time for that to bring about a mighty change of heart.
Yeah.
So I don't know how it works, Kurt. I don't know how it works.
It's cool.
Yeah, exactly. But it does work. Something very, very deep is working right now, working in us and through us. And we call him Christ.
Yeah.
And my faith is deeper and more settled and more powerful when I take time to just slow down here and there and like reconnect. Like, oh yeah, I get so busy, buzzing up here with all my ideas and everything I got to do, because everything I do is so important and it's all got to get done. When I just drop down and remember that, it's like, oh yeah, like I need to remember to play the long game. I had good teachers that showed me that.
Yeah. You mentioned slowing down again and going back even further in our conversation as far as, slowing down by 5%.
Yeah.
Another thought experiment that I'd love to like step into and just see what we could learn here, because leadership can be such an administrative heavy experience. Like we had Sunday morning, got to make sure the doors are unlocked, lights are on, chapel's ready to go. All right, someone playing the hymns. Like, all right, we're good. I think here we go. Right, and we can sort of get caught up in these steps, right? And I would just be interested, like what comes to mind. And I mean, I hope and pray there's a moment in time where Bishop McConkie exists, as far as like you as a bishop. Like what would that board look like? And
I'd be honored. I'd be honored someday, Kurt.
Yes. Well, if there's an application process, I'm going to send an endorsement letter with it. But I'm just curious, like how, like, I'm just like, what would that look like? Or what perspective could you give to a leader walking into a typical Sunday where they're about to facilitate a sacrament meeting where the most sacred emblems of that week are going to be, given to that congregation? And how do we slow down 5% there? Or what other concepts could we think about just sort of being the administrator of the gospel?
The response that's coming up right now, I have a feeling you and the listeners might not like.
Oh, even better. That's
nevertheless, this is the genuine response coming up.
Love it.
I do not want to offer some formula of what some like future version of myself might do to open up a sacrament meeting. That would be just some idea. And it would be some formula I appeal to. And like, once I have the formula, then I can finally I just know. Yeah. Like part of this vulnerability is saying like, I'm not going to know till I get there. It's when Nephi says, I was led by the Spirit, not knowing beforehand the things which I would do, or something to that effect. It's naked. It's vulnerable. It's like, what am I doing here? It's like, why? I'm bishop? Are you kidding me? But to like actually relax into that intensity and anxiety. And again, this faith of, but I know something deeper is going to come through me. If I don't allow myself to be moved by anxiety and restlessness and my own vanity to try to appear to others, to be more put together than I actually am, if I can just let something deeper come through, it wants to come through. And let me add that maybe this is the part of the response you might like.
Okay.
Yeah, slow down. I
appreciate what you said. That's good.
Slow down 5%. Slow down 50%, but then speed up. I'm not just here to offer some formula about we're all going too fast, we should slow down. Maybe that's true, maybe it's not. But I think from my experience, when I'm willing to go slow and feel something new and be moved in a new way, well, when I'm inspired, boom, I get up and I serve and I do something that's surprising to even me. And that might ask me to go really fast. This is not some like formulaic conversation about slowing down in the modern age. That, I mean, just kill me right now if that's what we're talking about. It's
Yeah,
deeper.
yeah,
It's if we slow down, it will allow the spirit to speed us up in the moments that we need to speed up, and it will allow the spirit to slow us down in the moments when we're going fast, just because we're in that habit of going fast.
Hmm.
So there's something about that. Like it's this dynamic equilibrium of life and the spirit being willing to go slow and willing to go fast. And I think
Yeah,
proving those contraries, if you will, to borrow a phrase from Joseph Smith, um, when we prove both of those contraries, when we show our willingness to do both of them, that's in my experience when the spirit can like really live through us in new and surprising ways.
yeah. As you go through all that, and I'm not sure if this is what you're articulating, but this is what came up for me: is this sense of authenticity as a leader shows up on a Sunday morning. It's not
Yeah.
about being prescriptive about this is how you handle it and this is what you say or do, but to
Yeah.
just be real in that moment and just be who you are presently,
Yeah.
and that's who you can offer to the world. It reminds me of an
Yeah.
experience when I was bishop, and we just had our son that week, and it led to he had some complications, and it led to 26 days in the NICU, right? And that
Oh,
Sunday
wow.
was ward conference where I was planning to speak. And I remember I stood up at the lectern, and there I am, like, I'm just like overwhelmed by the worry of my little newborn son in the hospital. And here I am, as the bishop, and got to give this talk. And I remember saying to the congregation, I have no business in talking right now because I am so broken and I'm so fearful and I don't know what to do.
Yeah.
And that
Yeah.
sort of became the launch pad of this talk where I articulated how the Savior was showing up for me in that moment,
Right.
and it was such a healing, unifying experience for the ward to be the bishop that was worried just as much as many of them in the congregation
Yeah.
were worried about their own self. So,
Yeah.
anyways, that's what came to mind:
Exactly.
that authenticity of a leader.
Yeah. I love that. That's such a moving story to me. And it reminds me of, in some ways, authenticity is a bit of a battle cry for the millennials. That's a word. I think its incidence
Yeah,
has increased 10,000% this
yeah.
generation. And that can evoke some eye rolling, some of it
Mm-hmm.
merited.
Mm-hmm.
But it's also pointing to something deeply powerful that I think you're pointing to. Like to be authentic it's another way of saying honest, just being
Yeah,
honest, not being a phony. And I think that does matter.
yeah, yeah. It's really powerful. So in this book, I'm trying to remember how old your kids were when you did the first, the online series. But in this book, there was parenting moments that you recorded,
Yeah,
and
totally.
how your this fullness of mortality was showing up in your role as a parent. What
Yeah.
what comes to mind? Like if you were to speak to a group of parents and just sort of having that fullness in terms of
Oh
parenting, what
man.
comes to mind?
What comes to mind when you ask this very tired dad with a 3.5-year-old and a 1-year-old daughter now, the fullness of exhaustion, the fullness of frustration, the fullness of,
Uh
like
huh.
it's super intense right now. My kids, they show me right where I break. Like every day they show me the upper limits of my patience and my
Hmm.
love and all that stuff. So parenting is a recovery practice for me. It's noticing like I run out of patience and noticing like hopefully I don't spend too much time in that space where I've run out of patience, and then realizing like, oh yeah, I need to learn to bring, more grace and more love to this moment, to myself, to my kids. So, if I'm totally honest, parenting right now is like just showing me, moment after moment, holding up a mirror to me in all the places I need to grow, all the ways that life, all the ways that God is asking me to grow. And it's painful.
Yeah.
It's sweet growth. It's painful growth.
Yeah. Yeah. My experience, I resonate with a lot of the examples you gave in the book, but just this new perspective of, we started in our life sort of in this, I'm the child, God's the parent. And then suddenly you're the parent to the child, and you gain a different level of empathy and understanding of God
Right.
because you're in that
Right.
role, and
Yeah.
that fullness is interpreted differently. That's been my experience. So
Yeah, I love that. No, it's really powerful. Yeah, I think being a parent is, it's changed my ideas about what parenting and what divine parenting is. So
yeah,
for those of us who are lucky to have our own children or adopt or to raise anybody and anything is a divine experience, I think.
yeah. And in terms of relationship, I want to maybe spend a few minutes on this because in the book you talk about a vulnerable moment of you talking about some counseling you and your wife received,
Yeah,
just in the dynamics of being
totally.
married, right? Like, and
That was such a millennial moment when I read the galleys. I'm like, the first page of that chapter is like a transcript from a therapy session. That's such a millennial thing to do, like to just like tell everybody about my therapy
that's
session.
right. Well,
But
therapy's
then I
cool,
thought it was for the
so
greater good.
that's right. It
Yeah.
is for the greater good. I appreciate it, and I don't know if you need to tell that story to put it in the context, but I'm just thinking in terms of as leaders, we're in the business of relationships, whether it's
Yeah.
relationships with those that we lead in our ward, or another thing that came to mind is helping individuals who are really struggling with their relationship with the church. Right there's
Right.
that
Yeah.
dissonance, that discontentment that they feel of like, I don't know if I can show up here on Sundays, right? And I guess that
Right.
was similar to your story as
Yeah.
you in those teenage years, right? But what comes to
Yeah.
mind as far as relationship and the fullness or mindfulness that we can understand in that context?
Yeah. So, I moved to the United States from China in 2011 and just, spontaneously got involved in this, informal ministry work of, spending all my time with people who had troubled relationships with the church. And I think that happened because that was so much my story. It was very easy for me to identify with and empathize with. Um, I'll bring this full circle. We're talking about the fullness of our human divinity, embodiment. Um, Certainly, what I realized after having hundreds, maybe thousands of conversations with people who are struggling in faith, struggling with their relationship to the church, I realized at a fundamental level, if I did nothing but just resonate with them, I mean at the level of our physical bodies. And an image I like, when you push, I'm not a musician, but if you push the left pedal on a piano down, is it the left pedal that lifts all of the pedals, or is that the right pedal?
I think the left pedal is the soft pedal, right?
Oh, thank you. We got
Yeah, yes,
someone
yes.
more
My,
accomplished than me at the piano.
I'm a piano lessons dropout, so
Okay, same. Okay, we've revealed ourselves. But there's a pedal on a piano. It lifts
yes.
all the hammers off the strings.
Uh-huh.
So that like once those hammers are lifted up, the strings are sensitive to any sound in the room. If you like kind of sing into them, they'll start to vibrate, right?
Yeah.
So what I realized after doing hundreds of conversations with people who were thinking about leaving the church, have left the church, but are contemplating coming back, the whole spectrum, I realized like a piano, if I just kind of lift those dampeners off the strings and I just let anything they're sensing, anything they're feeling just vibrate through me,
Hmm.
that they will feel that accompaniment
Hmm.
and that God will take care of the rest of that. Maybe God will give me something to say. Maybe God won't give me something to say, but just the accompaniment, the experience of feeling felt was actually healing for people.
Hmm.
And I learned to let go of any uh, claim to the results after that. I could feel something divine working through us and edifying us both if I was willing to just be so open and without answers, unless an answer came, that they would actually have the experience of like, wow, like I am felt, I am known. And of course, the experience of feeling felt and knowing that we're known is the experience of being loved by God. So what could possibly go wrong if, I'm able to just like give people a thimbleful of that experience of like, wow, I really feel felt and known again. Maybe there's more to this whole divine love thing than I thought.
Hmm.
That was an experience I had just over many years. I mean, I've been doing this work for 13 years now, and it really strikes me how profound it is and how much action is not occurring at the level of what we're saying. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, going back to what you said earlier, just allowing love to do love's work, and it really does the heavy lifting. That's the beauty of it is, and that's
Yeah.
the Savior is the one doing the lifting, right? That it's
Yeah.
his,
That's right.
his yoke that we're in, and he's
Thank
the one
you.
carrying us, right?
Yeah, no, you said it. That's the tagline for this whole conversation,
Yeah.
to let love do the heavy lifting.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's scary, you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Because we don't have control, right? We don't know. We don't know
Yeah,
how
and
to.
love has very different ideas about how to get things done than I do. Often it's scary. Like in theory, my ideas should be very similar to love's ideas, but in practice, they're very different.
Yeah.
Right? That's
Yeah.
disturbing to me. Like, how could love make that call? It's you know.
Yeah. And that's why I find
Think we can all relate to that as leaders.
yes, absolutely. And I love that about your story, and putting um contemplating the perspective of your grandfather in your story of, there were probably those scary moments of like, okay, what's Thomas doing? Oh, he's moving
Yeah,
overseas. Like now we've
yeah,
really lost him. Like, and when we're scared, that requires faith, and to see that long game, that faith that came in there, and but then it worked. But I can
totally.
see, lots of people can look at your journey and be like, no, Thomas, that was not what you should have done, but it's
Yeah,
like, but look at the result, like look what God has done, and his glory is
yeah.
made manifest through that. It's beautiful.
I think, yeah, and I think, I think both those perspectives are valid. I did some
Yeah,
things I shouldn't do,
sure.
and love is so awesome and forgiving that, if we can reflect that just a little bit more to each other, I
Yeah,
think I think we're all doing better than we fear.
yeah. Yeah, I think so. I hope so. That's my hope.
Yes, right. Indeed. I have
Well,
faith, so that's my feeling about it.
that's cool. Any other principle, concept, story that you want to make sure as we consider this, this audience of leaders in front of us? Anything else that comes to mind that we want to make sure we share before we wrap up, or what do you think?
Well, same question to you too, Kurt. I'm just feeling the richness of the conversation. I love the notes you've hit, and I love this conversation. This is one of my, unique opportunities to speak to a leader about church leadership.
Hmm.
Um, I really appreciate it. I appreciate so much what leadership does and how unique the challenges are right now in this generation. I think it's a new order of challenge than we've ever seen, and
Yeah.
that comes with a new order of opportunity. So I feel really blessed to just be in the questions with you, because I just feel in my heart right now how much I care about these same questions. So I'm grateful for your company in that.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Um, I guess ask one more question, but if people do want to check out the book and really jump in, because I mean, we've not even scratched the surface on some of the points and principles that you talk with. I think it's time well spent for people to check out and
Yeah.
contemplate the
Yeah.
words about this, fullness of human divinity. Um, where would you send people, or if the people want to learn more about you? And
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I would absolutely send people to Deseret Book. I got news from the publisher a few weeks ago that Deseret Book is picked up at At-One-Ment, and I'm thrilled because
nice.
it's a new kind of book. Like you said at the beginning of the conversation, like, hey, this feels a little woo, and I agree it can get confused with that, but to me, like it's my authentic expression of what Christ's love and gospel is doing on the planet right now. And I found this language and this approach to be especially resonant with millennial, Gen Z, Gen Alpha coming up quick on the heels of Gen Z.
Yep.
I found it to be a very powerful pastoral toolkit to engage upcoming generations. So I would check out Deseret Book and send them a message like, yeah, this is different, but it's good different, and it's helping us do what we do. I
Yeah.
hope that's the case. It has
Yeah.
been for me.
Awesome. Well, the last question I have for you, and maybe I want to put you in a context of, if your great grandchildren were listening to this and they're
Oh,
listening to
and they
Grandpa
are,
McConkie,
and
yes,
they
that's
are
right.
in a meaningful
Yeah,
way. They
yeah.
are. Yeah.
I mean, and they were, and you were to respond to the question, like, what does At-One-Ment mean to you? How would you
Yeah.
respond to that?
Oh, man, no one, that's such a lovely question. Thank you for invoking did you say great grandchildren?
Yeah, sure. Or great, or great, maybe.
You keep going. I mean, that's such a beautiful thing to ask, and it tunes me into them in a way that I haven't tuned into before. Love is such that love is so awesome that in love, past, present, and future are gathered. So when we're really in love and letting love do love's work, everything we've ever loved is already right here. The fullness of everything, the fullness of times, the fullness of the gospel, the fullness of love is right here. And we can draw from it. We can actually live our lives in a way that draws from this inexhaustible source. And I believe it's this divine love that's building God's kingdom, that's building Zion. And somehow, and this is hard to believe, like love needs us. It's not just that we need to love more and we need to love each other as a command. It's that love needs us to be love's means. And that is a stunning reality in Christ's gospel.